Hello friends, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Let's start the fifth and final part of the episode. Please like this video and subscribe the channel. Let's start. Christine watched the chaos unfold from a distance. For years, she had fought to be heard. She had pleaded, reasoned, sacrificed, and endured. Now, as the world dissected every revelation emerging from the courtroom, she found herself strangely silent. Not because she had nothing left to say, but because the truth had finally begun speaking for itself. The trial had transformed into something far larger than anyone had imagined. What began as a personal battle between former spouses had evolved into a national conversation about power, manipulation, family dynamics, and accountability. Every day brought new headlines. Every day exposed another layer of a story that many believed they already understood. Christine no longer needed to stand before cameras. She no longer needed to defend herself. The evidence had done that. The witnesses had done that. The years of hidden pain had done that. While reporters chased interviews and television panels debated the implications of the case, Christine focused her attention elsewhere. She dedicated herself to building something meaningful from the wreckage. The Brown Truth Initiative, the advocacy organization she had quietly launched, was growing at a pace that stunned even its own founders. Within days, thousands of letters poured in from women across the country. Some wrote about controlling marriages. Others described spiritual communities where questioning authority was considered betrayal. Many simply thanked Christine for speaking aloud truths they had spent years carrying in silence. Each letter reinforced the same reality. She had never been alone. For decades, countless women had endured similar experiences while convincing themselves that their suffering was normal. Now they were beginning to speak. Lawyers associated with the initiative started collaborating with policy experts and lawmakers. Together, they drafted proposals designed to protect vulnerable individuals trapped in coercive family structures. The centerpiece of those efforts soon became known as the Brown Bill. The proposed legislation focused on transparency requirements in religious domestic partnerships and informal family arrangements that operated outside traditional legal frameworks. Supporters argued that the bill could help prevent financial abuse, hidden assets, and exploitative power imbalances. What shocked observers most was the level of bipartisan support it received. In a political environment where agreement seemed increasingly rare, lawmakers from both sides of the aisle found common ground on the issue. The momentum was impossible to ignore. News organizations that had once treated the Brown family as little more than reality television entertainment suddenly shifted their tone. Journalists revisited old footage. Commentators reevaluated years of programming. Networks that had once celebrated the family's uniqueness began asking difficult questions about what viewers had actually been witnessing all along. Even the entertainment industry felt the pressure. Public scrutiny intensified. Executives scrambled. Former producers spoke anonymously. Crew members started sharing stories. And eventually, a major public statement was released. The network expressed regret for what it described as insufficient oversight and pledged to improve standards moving forward. But apologies arrived too late. Trust, once broken, is difficult to restore. For many viewers, the damage had already been done. As public confidence continued to erode, former cast members emerged with their own experiences. Some described concerns that had gone ignored. Others admitted they had stayed silent out of fear of losing opportunities. The floodgates were opening. Then came a revelation nobody anticipated. 3 adult children connected to the program began exploring legal action of their own. Unlike previous claims, these allegations focused not on family disputes, but on emotional harm associated with growing up under constant public scrutiny. The implications were enormous. Questions that had once been considered hypothetical suddenly became urgent. What responsibility did television producers bear toward children appearing on reality programs? How much protection should young participants receive? Could emotional exploitation be disguised as entertainment? The debate spread across the country. Psychologists weighed in. Child advocates joined discussions. Legal experts examined existing regulations. And beneath it all lingered a larger question about whether fame itself had become a mechanism for harm. As investigators dug deeper, another unexpected development emerged. A former insider connected to influential religious circles stepped forward. For years, this individual had remained anonymous. Now they were prepared to testify. According to their sworn statement, Kody had long been viewed by certain leaders as a model patriarch. Not because of compassion or wisdom, but because he appeared capable of maintaining obedience while preserving the appearance of harmony. The testimony ignited immediate controversy. Religious scholars debated its implications. Commentators dissected every word. Critics argued that the statement exposed dangerous attitudes toward authority and gender roles. Supporters dismissed the claims. The public watched, and the discussion grew louder. What had once been marketed as a loving alternative family arrangement was now being scrutinized through a completely different lens. Terms like coercion, control, manipulation, financial dependency. These words began appearing in mainstream conversations. The narrative had changed. Meanwhile, Christine refused to embrace celebrity status. Television producers approached her with documentary proposals. Publishing companies expressed interest. Interview requests arrived daily. She declined most of them. She understood the seductive nature of public attention. She had lived inside its glow. She knew how quickly admiration could become distortion. Fame had already cost her enough. Instead, she focused on healing. Not only her own healing, her children's healing. The healing of people who reached out through letters and messages. The healing of individuals who recognized pieces of themselves in her story. While Christine concentrated on rebuilding, Kody's public image continued deteriorating. Photographs captured moments that would have seemed unimaginable only months earlier. Once confident and commanding, he now appeared exhausted and increasingly isolated. Videos surfaced online. Arguments, outbursts, confrontations. Each clip fueled additional speculation. Every headline intensified scrutiny. Former allies distanced themselves. Relationships fractured. And the man who once controlled the narrative found himself unable to stop it. Then came another shock. Robyn released a statement through legal counsel. The words were brief, measured, carefully chosen. Yet their impact was undeniable. She acknowledged her own role in events while also describing herself as someone who had been influenced and manipulated. The statement avoided dramatic accusations. It didn't need them. Its significance came from the simple fact that it existed. For years, Robyn had been viewed as Kody's strongest supporter. Now even that certainty appeared shaken. Christine offered no public response. She understood something many people did not. Facts often speak louder than reactions. Inside her home, however, life remained complicated. The courtroom victories did not erase years of emotional damage. Her children still carried questions, still carried wounds, still carried confusion. One evening, one of them asked the question she had been dreading. Will Dad go to jail? The room fell silent. Christine took a moment before answering. She chose her words carefully. That's not up to us, she said softly. What's up to us is healing. The answer wasn't dramatic. It wasn't satisfying. But it was honest. And honesty had become the foundation of everything she was trying to build. Across the state, support services expanded. Counselors volunteered their time. Therapists offered assistance. Schools created outreach programs. Community organizations mobilized. The response exceeded expectations. People wanted to help. Donations poured into Christine's foundation. Within weeks, contributions surpassed $1 million. The money would fund counseling programs, educational resources, and advocacy efforts. For the first time in years, hope felt tangible. Yet the biggest blow to Kody's reputation was still coming. A veteran showrunner from the reality series agreed to participate in an extensive deposition. The individual had spent years observing the family behind the scenes. What they described stunned observers. According to testimony, Kody was intensely focused on managing public perception. He allegedly rehearsed emotional moments, practiced conversations, strategized appearances, and repeatedly pushed producers toward storylines that portrayed him as misunderstood rather than controlling. Perhaps most damaging was a recovered clip from footage that never aired. In the recording, Kody became angry after a producer suggested discussing Christine's emotional struggles. The exchange painted a dramatically different picture from the one viewers had been shown. When the footage leaked, it spread rapidly across social media. Millions watched. Millions reacted. Millions reconsidered years of assumptions. A phrase from the clip unexpectedly became a rallying cry. People reclaimed it, printed it on shirts, displayed it on signs, used it as a symbol of resistance. What had once been intended as an insult became a badge of solidarity. Christine observed the phenomenon with mixed emotions. She appreciated the support. Yet, she never wanted to become a symbol. She wanted truth. She wanted accountability. She wanted healing. Most of all, she wanted peace. And peace remained frustratingly elusive. Still, she sensed something changing. Not only in the public conversation, not only in the legal proceedings, but within herself. For the first time in years, she no longer felt trapped by the past. The future remained uncertain. The battles were not over. More revelations would come. More secrets would emerge. More challenges awaited. But something fundamental had shifted. Fear no longer controlled her. And that realization proved more powerful than any courtroom victory. The empire that had once seemed untouchable was crumbling. Not because one person attacked it. Not because one lawsuit succeeded. But because truth had finally found enough voices willing to carry it forward. And those voices were only beginning to be heard. The movement begins the collapse of Kody's carefully constructed image was no longer merely a media spectacle. It had become a cultural reckoning. What started as a family dispute had transformed into something far larger than anyone anticipated. Every new revelation seemed to expose another hidden layer, another buried truth, another consequence that stretched beyond the walls of a single household. Yet amid the chaos, Christine remained remarkably focused. She refused to spend her days celebrating Kody's downfall. She refused to become consumed by revenge. Instead, she devoted herself to building something that could outlast headlines. The Brown Truth Initiative continued expanding at an extraordinary pace. New volunteers arrived every week. Advocates from across the country offered support. Attorneys donated countless hours. Mental health professionals partnered with the organization. Survivors shared their stories. Soon, what had started as a small effort evolved into a nationwide movement. Letters arrived from every corner of the United States. Some came from women trapped in controlling relationships. Others came from adult children who had grown up under authoritarian family structures. Many simply described years of silence. Years of being told that their pain wasn't real. Years of convincing themselves that suffering was normal. Christine read as many of the letters as she could. Some left her crying. Some left her angry. Some left her stunned. But all of them reminded her of one simple truth. People needed to be heard. For too long, too many voices had been dismissed. Now they were finally speaking. And people were listening. The movement gained momentum when several lawmakers publicly endorsed the Brown Bill. The proposed legislation sought to strengthen transparency protections in spiritual unions and domestic arrangements that often operated outside traditional legal oversight. Supporters argued that financial accountability and legal clarity could help prevent abuse. Critics called the bill controversial. Supporters called it necessary. The debate dominated television panels for weeks. Yet the controversy only increased public interest. The more people discussed the issue, the more survivors felt empowered to come forward. Christine watched the momentum grow with a mixture of pride and caution. She understood how quickly public enthusiasm could fade. Movements built on outrage often disappeared when attention shifted elsewhere. She wanted something different. She wanted permanence. She wanted change that would survive long after the cameras moved on. One morning, while sitting with her legal team, she outlined a new goal. "We're not building a response," she said quietly. "We're building a legacy." Those words stayed with everyone in the room. Because they captured exactly what was happening. The story was no longer about exposing one man. It was about preventing future harm. As public awareness increased, more members of the Brown family began finding their own voices. For years, many had remained silent. Some out of loyalty, some out of fear, some because they simply didn't know how to express what they had experienced. Now that silence was beginning to crack. Mary became one of the first to step forward publicly. During a podcast appearance, she spoke with unusual honesty. She reflected on the years she spent believing that silence equaled loyalty. For a long time, she had convinced herself that enduring hardship was part of being supportive. Now she viewed those years differently. Silence wasn't loyalty, she explained. It was survival. The statement resonated across social media. Thousands shared clips from the interview. Many viewers described hearing their own experiences reflected in her words. The response was overwhelming. Messages poured in. Stories followed. Support grew. Shortly afterward, Mary announced she would join the Brown Truth Initiative as a speaker and advocate. Her goal wasn't punishment. Her goal was education. She wanted to help other women recognize patterns she had spent years ignoring. She wanted people to understand the difference between sacrifice and surrender. Most importantly, she wanted others to know they were not alone. At the same time, plans began taking shape for what would become the organization's largest event. Christine called it the Voices Unheard Summit. The conference would be held in Arizona. The location carried symbolic significance. Years earlier, Arizona represented the promise of a fresh start for the Brown family. Now it would become the site of a different beginning. The summit's purpose was simple: provide a platform for people whose stories had been ignored. No reality television. No manufactured drama. No carefully edited narratives. Just truth. Registration exceeded every expectation. Thousands signed up within days. Advocacy groups committed resources. Legal experts volunteered to participate. Mental health professionals offered workshops. Survivors prepared to share their experiences. The summit was becoming something much larger than a conference. It was becoming a gathering place for healing. Meanwhile, the Brown children increasingly stepped into the public conversation. Many had spent years shielding themselves from scrutiny. Now some felt ready to speak. Gwendolyn began posting thoughtful video reflections online. The videos weren't attacks. They weren't revenge. They were honest recollections. She discussed growing up in a complicated family. She discussed feeling overlooked. She discussed learning to understand experiences she once couldn't explain. One particular video spread rapidly online. In it, she recalled a childhood disappointment that had stayed with her for years. A moment when she felt invisible. A moment when she questioned her own importance. The story itself wasn't extraordinary. What made it powerful was its honesty. Millions watched. Thousands responded. Many recognized their own childhood experiences in her words. The comment sections filled with stories from people who had spent years feeling unseen. Suddenly, Gwendolyn wasn't simply sharing memories. She was creating connection. Other family members followed. Some posted messages. Some gave interviews. Some chose private conversations. Each approach was different. Yet together they formed a larger picture. A picture that could no longer be dismissed as isolated complaints. The narrative was changing. Not because critics demanded it. Because the people who lived it were finally telling their own stories. Even members of Robin's side of the family appeared to be reassessing the past. Questions emerged. Old assumptions weakened. Relationships grew more complicated. Many struggled to reconcile childhood memories with newly revealed information. The emotional impact was profound. Because discovering difficult truths about a parent isn't simply painful. It's disorienting. It forces people to reevaluate years of experiences. Years of beliefs. Years of trust. While others were speaking publicly, Kody largely disappeared from view. Rumors circulated constantly. Some claimed he was preparing legal strategies. Others suggested he was attempting to salvage remaining assets. Still others described growing isolation. Very little could be confirmed. What was clear, however, was that the confident public figure who once dominated television screens seemed increasingly absent. The silence surrounding him became almost as noticeable as the criticism itself. His attorneys occasionally released statements maintaining his innocence. They insisted he acted in good faith. They denied allegations. They challenged accusations. But public opinion had shifted dramatically. People were no longer focused on defenses. They were focused on evidence. And new evidence seemed to emerge every week. As the movement expanded, Christine found herself corresponding with people from far beyond the United States. Letters arrived from Canada, the United Kingdom, Australia, Europe. Women from different backgrounds described remarkably similar experiences, different cultures, different religions, different communities, yet many of the same patterns. Control disguised as protection, silence disguised as loyalty, fear disguised as faith. The similarities fascinated Christine. They also concerned her, because they suggested the problem was larger than any one family, larger than any one community, larger than any one television show. The issue was systemic, and systemic problems required systemic solutions. That realization inspired the next phase of her work. Together with legal experts and policy advisors, she launched a campaign known as Project Resound. Its mission was ambitious: expand legal recognition of coercive control, strengthen protections for children living in informal family structures, close loopholes that allowed emotional abuse to remain invisible, promote accountability where traditional systems often failed. The campaign immediately attracted attention. Supporters praised its vision. Critics questioned its practicality. Public debate intensified. Yet every discussion generated awareness, and awareness generated momentum. During a live stream discussing the initiative, Christine made a statement that quickly spread across social media. "The law can't heal every broken heart," she said, "but it can help prevent some of them from breaking." The quote appeared in newspapers. It appeared on advocacy websites. It appeared on signs carried by supporters. For many people, it captured the essence of what she was trying to accomplish. Not revenge. Prevention. Not punishment. Protection. As the Voices Unheard Summit approached, anticipation continued building. More than 3,000 people registered. Media outlets requested access. Advocacy organizations prepared presentations. Volunteers coordinated logistics. The event was rapidly becoming one of the largest gatherings of its kind. Then something unexpected happened. Christine received a private message. The sender surprised her. Robin. The message wasn't dramatic. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a defense. It contained only a simple request. If there was room for people who had also been manipulated, she wanted to attend. Christine stared at the message for a long time. The history between them was complicated, painful, layered. Years of misunderstanding and resentment could not be erased by a single sentence. Yet something about the message felt genuine. Eventually she responded, "There is room." Then she added one condition. "Come ready to listen." Robin agreed. The exchange remained private. No announcements were made. No publicity followed. But the decision would eventually become one of the summit's most significant moments. As the event drew closer, Christine became increasingly reflective. She spent long hours preparing. Not speeches. Not media appearances. Purpose. She wanted the summit to belong to survivors. Not to her. Not to celebrities. Not to headlines. To survivors. When opening day finally arrived, the atmosphere felt unlike anything she had experienced before. Thousands gathered beneath Arizona's vast sky. Some carried signs. Some carried notebooks. Some carried years of pain. Many carried hope. There were no flashing lights. No dramatic entrances. No television theatrics. Only people. People ready to speak. People ready to listen. People ready to heal. And as Christine stepped onto the stage for the first time, she understood something clearly. The movement no longer belonged to her. It belonged to everyone who had found their voice because someone else finally used theirs. The story that began with one woman's suffering had become something far greater. A movement. A mission. A promise. And the most significant chapters were still ahead. The last reckoning, the morning of the Voices Unheard summit, arrived beneath a vast Arizona sky painted in shades of gold and crimson. Thousands of people gathered before sunrise. Some came carrying notebooks filled with years of private reflections. Some arrived holding photographs. Others brought nothing except memories they had spent decades trying to forget. The atmosphere was unlike anything Christine had ever witnessed. There were no celebrities seeking attention. No reality television crews manufacturing conflict. No producers shaping narratives. Instead, there were survivors. Mothers. Fathers. Children. Advocates. Counselors. Attorneys. People from every background united by a simple desire to reclaim their voices. The amphitheater stood surrounded by towering red rock formations that seemed to watch over the gathering like silent guardians. As attendees filled the seats, conversations remained subdued. Many people were meeting others who understood experiences they had never been able to explain. For the first time, countless individuals no longer felt isolated. They felt seen. When Christine finally stepped onto the stage, the crowd rose in applause. Not because she was famous, not because she had become a symbol, but because she represented something deeper. She represented survival. She represented perseverance. She represented the possibility that truth could outlive manipulation. The applause continued for nearly a minute before gradually fading. Christine stood quietly, waiting. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm, steady, unshaken. We spent years believing we were broken because we couldn't fit inside someone else's version of who we were supposed to be, she said. She paused. The audience listened. But maybe we were never meant to fit their story. Maybe we were meant to write our own. The words landed with extraordinary force. Across the amphitheater, people nodded. Some cried. Others simply sat still, absorbing the moment. For many, it was the first time they had heard their own feelings articulated so clearly. The summit unfolded throughout the day. Panel discussions explored coercive control and emotional manipulation. Attorneys explained legal protections. Mental health professionals offered guidance on trauma recovery. Survivors shared stories that ranged from heartbreaking to inspiring. There were workshops, support groups, quiet conversations beneath shaded tents, moments of grief, moments of healing, moments of hope. Most importantly, there was honesty. The event never became about Christine. She intentionally avoided remaining in the spotlight. Whenever possible, she handed the microphone to someone else. She wanted the summit to serve as a platform, not a monument. As the afternoon progressed, attendees noticed a familiar face entering the venue. Robin arrived quietly. No cameras, no entourage, no attempt to attract attention. She wore simple clothing and entered holding her daughter's hand. Many people recognized her immediately. A ripple of surprise moved through the crowd. Yet Robin did not seek a stage. She did not request to speak. She simply found a seat and listened. Throughout the day, tears streamed down her face. Not dramatic tears. Not performative tears. The quiet tears of someone confronting difficult truths. At one point, Christine looked across the audience and their eyes met. Neither woman spoke. No gestures were exchanged. No dramatic reconciliation occurred. Yet something passed between them. An acknowledgement. A recognition. A shared understanding that both had survived the same storm in different ways. As sunset approached, the summit entered its final session. The desert sky glowed orange and purple. The crowd remained attentive. No one seemed eager to leave. Christine returned to the stage one final time. Her closing message was brief, powerful, memorable. "What comes next is not justice," she said. "It's responsibility." The audience fell silent. "We revealed a broken system. Now we have to make sure nobody else gets trapped inside it." When she finished speaking, there was no triumphant celebration. Only thoughtful applause. The kind of applause reserved for truths people know they will carry with them long after the moment ends. Most attendees believed the summit marked the conclusion of the story. They were wrong. Within days, everything changed again. It began with an envelope. No return address. No postmark. Only one name written on the front. Christine. Inside was a letter. The author was someone Christine had not thought about in years. Philip Reynolds, a former producer from the earliest seasons of the television series. The contents of the letter would alter the course of everything. Philip described years of behind-the-scenes manipulation. He named executives, referenced internal communications, provided timelines, detailed decisions that had never been publicly acknowledged. According to the letter, certain producers had knowingly edited footage in ways that protected Kody while portraying Christine as unstable, jealous, or irrational. The allegations were explosive, but they did not stop there. Attached to the letter were documents, copies of emails, production notes, editing directives, evidence. Lots of evidence. Christine spent hours reading through the material. The deeper she went, the more disturbed she became. What she discovered suggested something far larger than personal betrayal. It suggested institutional complicity. According to the documents, scenes had allegedly been manipulated, context removed, narratives reshaped, conversations selectively presented. The purpose appeared simple: protect the image of the family patriarch, preserve the show's central storyline, maintain ratings, regardless of the emotional consequences. One revelation hit particularly hard. There were references to footage involving children. Footage that reportedly documented fear, distress, and emotional struggles. Material that never aired. Material that was allegedly removed from consideration entirely. Christine sat alone for hours after reading the final page. The realization was devastating. For years, she believed she had been fighting one man. Now she wondered whether she had been fighting an entire machine. Her legal team immediately began verifying the claims. Within 48 hours, additional sources emerged. Former crew members, editors, production assistants. Each offered pieces of the same story. Together, their accounts painted a troubling picture. The network soon found itself facing scrutiny unlike anything in its history. Journalists launched investigations. Advocacy groups demanded answers. Former employees came forward. Questions multiplied. The story dominated national headlines. And for the first time, public attention shifted away from Kody. The focus moved toward the institutions that had enabled him. Christine reached a conclusion. The issue was no longer personal. It was systemic. She instructed her attorneys to proceed. A lawsuit was filed. Not against former family members. Not against individual participants. Against the network itself. The complaint alleged exploitation, negligence, emotional harm, and failure to protect vulnerable participants. The legal battle immediately attracted national attention. Media analysts called it unprecedented. Child advocacy organizations expressed support. Legal scholars debated potential implications. The entertainment industry watched nervously. If the allegations proved true, the consequences could be enormous. As preparations for litigation intensified, another painful development emerged. Rumors began circulating about meetings between network representatives and individuals connected to the case. At first, most people dismissed the speculation. Then evidence surfaced suggesting that Janelle had been approached by executives months earlier. The revelation shocked everyone, especially Christine. When confronted privately, Janelle admitted she had accepted money in exchange for remaining uninvolved in certain legal discussions. She insisted she never betrayed confidential information. She insisted she had been trying to protect her family. Yet the admission created a wound that neither woman could immediately ignore. For Christine, the pain was profound. Not because of the money, because of the silence. Again, silence had shaped too much of her life. Now it had appeared once more, this time from someone she trusted. The fallout generated weeks of media coverage. Commentators debated motives. Supporters chose sides. Speculation intensified. Christine refused to participate publicly. She focused on the legal battle ahead. And the legal battle was growing rapidly. Federal investigators began examining aspects of the case involving child welfare concerns. Advocacy organizations joined the effort. Whistleblowers emerged. Former interns testified. Editors shared records. Internal communications surfaced. One particularly damaging email appeared repeatedly in news reports. Its contents suggested that emotional instability among participants was viewed as beneficial for ratings. Public reaction was swift. Outrage spread. Industry leaders called for reform. The pressure became overwhelming. As evidence accumulated, the lawsuit evolved into something much larger than anyone anticipated. It was no longer about one television program. It was about accountability. Who bears responsibility when entertainment profits from emotional suffering? What obligations exist toward children appearing on reality television? How far can producers go in shaping narratives before they become harmful? The courtroom eventually became the center of those questions. Weeks turned into months. Testimony filled the record. Experts appeared. Documents were reviewed. Arguments were presented. Then came the final hearing. The courtroom overflowed with observers. Journalists filled every available seat. Advocates gathered in hallways. Former participants watched anxiously. Christine arrived early. She sat quietly beside her attorneys. No speeches. No dramatic gestures. No public statements. Only patience. Years of struggle had led to this moment. The judge entered. The room stood. Silence followed. What happened next would be discussed for years. The court concluded that significant failures had occurred. Evidence demonstrated patterns of harmful conduct. Certain practices were deemed unacceptable. Protections had been insufficient. Accountability was necessary. Financial penalties were imposed. Damages were awarded. Mandatory reforms were ordered. New oversight requirements were established. The decision sent shockwaves throughout the entertainment industry. Networks immediately began reviewing policies. Producers reevaluated procedures. Advocacy organizations celebrated the ruling as a major step forward. For many observers, it represented a turning point. A moment when public expectations changed permanently. As the proceedings ended, Christine remained seated for several seconds. Not because she was overwhelmed by victory, because she was overwhelmed by relief. The fight was finally over. At least this fight. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. Cameras flashed. Questions echoed from every direction. Christine stopped briefly before entering her vehicle. Her statement was simple. This was never about revenge. Nothing more. Nothing less. The words appeared on front pages around the country the following morning. In the weeks that followed, invitations poured in. Universities requested speaking engagements. Organizations offered leadership positions. Media companies proposed documentaries. Publishers suggested book deals. Christine declined most of them. She had spent years trapped inside other people's narratives. Now she wanted to live her own. Instead, she focused on family. She purchased land in Utah, a quiet property far removed from cameras and controversy. There she began creating something she called Truth House, a retreat designed to support healing, education, and recovery. A place where people could rediscover trust. A place where shame could finally be left behind. The project became her passion. Not because it generated headlines, because it generated hope. Months later, an invitation arrived from a newly established Media Ethics Advisory Board. The organization wanted Christine's perspective, her experience, her insight. At first, she hesitated. She had promised herself fewer public responsibilities, less visibility, more peace. Yet, after careful consideration, she accepted. Not for recognition, for prevention. If her experiences could help protect future families, the effort would be worthwhile. At her first meeting, she did not arrive with charts or presentations. Instead, she brought stories. Real stories. Human stories. Stories that reminded policymakers why their decisions mattered. The impact was immediate. People listened. Not because she was famous. Because she spoke from experience. Years passed. Gradually, the headlines faded. The court cases concluded. The investigations ended. The public moved on to other stories. Yet the effects remained. Policies changed. Protections improved. Conversations continued. Families found support. Survivors found community. And Christine found something she once believed impossible. Peace. Not perfect peace. Not permanent peace. But genuine peace. The kind that comes from knowing you survived. The kind that comes from refusing to let pain define your future. The kind that comes from telling the truth despite every reason to remain silent. In the end, the story was never really about courtrooms. It was never truly about television. It was never entirely about Kody. It was about voice. The voice of a woman who spent years being told she was wrong. The voice of children who finally felt safe enough to speak. The voice of survivors who discovered they were not alone. And the voice of truth itself. Because truth has a remarkable quality. It can be delayed. It can be ignored. It can be buried. But eventually, it rises. And when it does, it changes everything. That became Christine's legacy. Not victory. Not fame. Not revenge. Truth. And for countless people whose lives she touched, that was more than enough.